Welcome, you're watching Head to Head. I'm Antonina Antosha with UATV. The international investigation team that is inspecting the crash of the passenger Boeing MH17 has publicly announced the results of its work on May 24th in The Hague, Netherlands. To give you some background, the MH17 airplane of the Malaysian Airlines that was flying from Amsterdam to Kuala Lumpur was shut down on July 17, 2014 and fell down in the Donetsk region under control of the Russian-led militants. All those who were on the board, that is 298 passengers and crew members, died. It is suspected that Russia is responsible for the catastrophe, as the MH17 plane was shot with a Russian-produced Buk missile system. To give us more clarity on the issue, we're joined in the studio today by Gosha Tikhiy. He is a freelance producer with ARD channel in Germany. Hello, and thank you for joining us.
Hello. Thanks for
So
inviting.
what are the first announcements made in the Netherlands?
First of all, in your text, it was said that it's suspected that Russia is behind this.
That was written in the morning.
But actually, it's
now
established.
we have the confirmation,
and
right?
this is the core meaning of the event today, is that it's established today that Russia is responsible. Russian military is responsible for what happened.
As a matter of fact, we do have the announcement of the Dutch chief prosecutor. I would like us to listen to it now.
Of a part of the investigation team in Kiev and the cooperation with our partners over there is all the more important. Nevertheless, in the past period, a lot of progress has been made, including identifying those directly involved. On the 28th of September 2016, we announced that there was a group of about 100 persons that could be linked in some way or another to the downing of MH17. And we've booked a lot of progress in this respect. By now, the role of the major part of them has become a lot clearer. However, it may damage the investigation and the final legal proceedings if we make clear to those responsible and the other parties involved how much we know exactly. Therefore, you will understand that the courtroom is preeminently the place where the Public Prosecution Service will comment on the accusation of and the burden of proof against individual persons.
All right, so he doesn't clearly state that Russia is responsible for the downing of the MH17 airplane, but there were other announcements.
Well,
could you comment?
He doesn't state in this quote,
yeah, I know,
and he doesn't name the exact people, but the fact that the missile, it is established that it was produced and stored in Kursk Brigade, 53rd Brigade. This is a fact that establishes Russia's responsibility. What else important? Of course, they have this list of people, and they will not disclose it yet. And I completely understand why they do this, because they want these people to live up until the moment that they will be brought to justice. If they disclose now the names or hint who these people are, of course, it will lead to just these people being killed, because basically they are
That's what
in
Russia
Russia.
does.
Yes, they are in Russia, and as far as I know, there are already facts of some people who were involved in the crime disappearing in Russia.
So they've already gone missing.
Yes, so it's absolutely clear why they don't disclose this information. But the fact that Russia is responsible for the tragedy is established since today. And finally, what Ukraine basically, and I think it's important to highlight that Ukraine said this in the following days after the tragedy.
I remember.
That Russia is responsible. This was a Russian missile operated by Russians. At that time, the reaction of the Western partners was, okay, this is Ukrainian version of events. There are other versions. There's Russian version. It's really hard to establish what's true, what's not. So today's event is important because Ukraine has a right now to say, trust what we say. Trust what we say. We were right. The official investigation established what we said days after the tragedy.
Well, the media in Ukraine here and around the world have already called this catastrophe a turning point in the relationship between Europe and Russia, right? How would you comment?
Yes, I think if we look back at the period of the summer 2014 and we look at the dynamics of the conflict, of course, when almost 300 citizens of the Western countries were killed in such a horrible way, it changed the attitude, because the conflict became closer to the people in the West, to the public opinion in the West, to the governments in the West. Before that, it was rather some conflict in the eastern Ukraine, not really clear which conflict was going on there. But this event, this horrible event, brought it closer to them. And I think it changed, of course, the attitude. It, to some extent, it influenced the further sanctions, which were much more robust than what was expected before. And the general attitude, of course, what's also important is the whole campaign of fakes that Russia launched since then. The whole campaign of trying to deceive and distract the investigation, distract the facts, invent some theories, and so on and so on. This all influenced, of course, because Russia just lost credibility completely. I think that MH17 was the case which destroyed Russian credibility in the West. What Russia says.
You were on the scene of the catastrophe, right? Am I right?
Yes, yes.
Share.
Well, I saw lots of scenes in Donbass throughout the whole period of 4 years. Lots of, like, many horrible scenes, but this one was probably the most horrible and really, I would say, apocalyptic, because it looked like imagine summer fields and little villages which are crushed by few, not even one crash site, but like few, it was 3 or 4 main crash sites, with black burnt soil, with melted metal because of the temperature, with the smell of death around, and I don't want to shock our audience too much, but it was
That's okay. That's your personal experience, which is actually really
horrible thing, and I think now it's really forgotten sometimes in this whole geopolitical struggle, the personal dimension of what happened, of the pain that the relatives had to live through and have to live through till now, of this sudden, completely unexpected loss of their close ones, as well as the people, by the way, on the ground, these villagers, we spoke to them, who were just witnessing debris and parts of bodies raining down on their villages and in their backyards. I'm not sure if it's a really...
this is horrible,
what should be told in a broadcast, but this is what happened, and it was horrible how lost and how traumatized were those people as well. And I remember that we actually, as journalists, were traumatized. We had a really hysterical laugh in the evening when we edited the material that we filmed.
Oh, you know what it's called like in psychology? That's called the laugh of the hangman. Because you could not get out of the situation, but your consciousness needed a relief, so that's what happened.
Yes, of course. You as a journalist have to treat it professionally on one hand, because it's just something that you work on. But there are events which you cannot treat professionally because you get so affected by what you see. It's just overwhelming and not possible to comprehend completely.
Absolutely. Speaking of relatives, you are probably well aware of the fact that people from Ukraine wrote a letter to Russian people saying that they do not blame them for anything, but it's the Russian authorities that are to blame for, and they expect them to be held responsible for what happened, especially with the 2018 football championship coming up. How would you evaluate this move of writing a letter?
Well, I think it's important that they wrote it in the eve of the championship, because, of course, Russia will use the football championship as a way to present itself in a good way in a global community.
Hard these days.
Which will be hard these days, but still. And this creates an absurd contrast between what Russia is really and how it will present itself during the World Cup. And I think it's quite shameful that this cup was still was not withdrawn from Russia, and Russia was led to have it, having downed MH17, waging the war in Ukraine at this very moment when the championship is taking place, with people dying each week. And basically, as well, we have to remember that
they had the scandal, right?
Absolutely,
with the doping.
Russia abused world sport on an unprecedented scale. Of course, doping exists in many countries, but the scale of what Russia did...
Right, to take it to that extent...
It's unprecedented, and for a country that has abused world sport to such extent to host such a major sports event is an absurd. And I think this absurd became possible because there are influences of Russian Federation in sports institutions, world sports institutions, including FIFA, which was completely reluctant to look into doping allegations and take a decision to withdraw this cup. Now we have this absurd going on, this contrast of Russia, of what it is, with the allegations and accusation of MH17 downing, of all the rest that Russia does, at the same time whitewashing its international reputation by a World Cup of football.
Okay, coming back to the case of MH17, what happens next?
Of course, we have to understand, especially in Ukraine, I think people did not learn anything very new with this,
Clearly,
with today's revelations, because that's what basically people knew already for a long time. And on this mass level, I don't think it changes so much the mass perception. But what it changes is the legal dimension, because now...
Because there's an official announcement that Russia is responsible.
That Russia is responsible. Any person who will now deny it or will say not everything is so clear there, we don't really know, it's complacent to just lying, because this is not what happened. And we know it now as an established fact. And of course, with time, not now, but with time, this war crime, I hope that those responsible for it will be brought to justice. As we see years later in Balkans, for example, in consequence of wars, those responsible for war crimes are brought to tribunal, are brought to international tribunal. Some of them died already, some of them drink poison just in the courtroom, some of them get imprisoned. But I think this is exactly what will happen to those Russians who are responsible for MH17. Of course, we talk about the highest command, and of course I think that the president of Russian Federation should have known at least that this book is transmitted to Donbass, because it's not possible that the highest military command would not know that something like that happens.
I think he knew.
Yes.
Well, in any case, thank you so much for coming. It was very interesting, for finding time and sharing this info with us.
Thanks for having
That was Gosha Tikhiy. He's a freelance producer with ARD channel in Germany. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned with UATV for more.